about areas that we want to consider when choosing a college, and the topic within that is community. So, Bobby, how are you doing?
Doing just great. Yeah, enjoying the cool down a little bit with some rain, and that's nice. In Dallas, it's usually blisteringly hot. So,
And in
yeah.
our business, the cool down a little bit while people are worried about getting kids into school and all of that. So we actually have a breather for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I've got a little lull after a very busy summer. So yeah, very nice. Good to catch up on some things.
All right, so let's just jump in. Anybody that's listening, please ask questions, throw your thoughts in on this. But we're talking about considering what the community is like when you're considering a college, and by that we're meaning things like, what's the social scene like on campus? What's the vibe when you go up and you're walking around not only campus but the city. So Bobby, let's talk about your experience at TCU.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, that's one of the things, I looked at lots of different colleges back a long time ago. And when I had the opportunity, since my older brother went there, when we went around, I was able to actually meet and talk to some students. And also TCU was really good about, like, back then, and I'm sure they still do it, letting you come do class visits, sit in on a class, actually have a student who's there take you around for an entire day and let you hang out with them and stuff like that. And just really saw that, it was a very welcoming place that, like, you would see people of all different types and backgrounds sitting and talking to each other in the quad and stuff. And I thought that gave me a really good sense of feeling of community.
Yeah, and I really feel like most colleges these days do understand how important this is and are offering those types of experiences. And as we've talked quite a bit, doing the college tours are just hands down one of the most important things when you're considering that college, just to see what the vibe is like, when you can.
Absolutely. And when we talked earlier this year about, the things that lead to success in college and after college, part of it was like getting involved, getting to know your professors, but just being part of social groups, part of clubs and things like that, right? So you want a place that would have some groups you want to join and things like that, right? And I think, you might think that every college is like this, but there are colleges that are sort of just commuter colleges where people show up, they go to class, and then they drive back to wherever they are, and they're not staying around after class and talking to people. And so, yeah, that can be affected by where the college is located, whether it's in the middle of a big city or something else, and yeah, it could not just be like the campus itself. Like, there are some colleges where, like, I think Yale is an example that is in New Haven, Connecticut, and the students like never ever leave the campus. So they have their own community, but they kind of never associate with the reputation as they don't go out and hang out with the townies, in New Haven, which is a more industrial town and stuff like that. So part of this is like, what do you actually want, right? And what appeals to you?
Yeah. And, bringing that up, you mentioned commuter schools. It's a really great question for you to ask on the college tour, because it may not feel like a commuter school when you're there because all the students are milling around. But a good question to ask is, how many students stay over the weekends? I have a list of questions that you can ask on your college tours that I will attach to the Facebook Live, so that everybody, can grab that and download it if they'd like. But, really great question to dig into, because you do want to make sure that if you're looking for a place that has this huge community, that's part of the deal.
Absolutely. And, I guess also, like, a lot of colleges require students to live on campus for the first year or maybe even for multiple years. And that's another thing to ask about, is like, that if they do that, then it's likely that you've got a strong community there. And if they don't require that, there's a good chance that, a lot of students are just not going to be on campus and are going to be, elsewhere a lot. And yeah, then if you were trying to be on campus and everybody's gone every weekend, that would really be terrible. Like that wouldn't be
Yeah. Well, another example that you're making me think about is, you've got the college campuses like you were talking about, that it's all about staying on campus. But then you've got cities like where I went to school at the University of Iowa, where, man, that town rallies around the students, and it's attached to the downtown, and
Mhm.
there's just this huge vibe in when school's going on with all these kids being all over town, really.
Right.
And then in the summers, it's way different. So that's another thing for you to
Yep.
consider, especially that junior and senior year, maybe sophomore year, if you're going to be staying in campus over the summer. What's that like? Ask that question as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, my niece goes to Vanderbilt in Nashville, and that's definitely a college that is very integrated into the city and the downtown, and the students, are not just on campus. They're always, out in downtown Nashville and things like that. And it's really a fun, beautiful city. And so one of the things is, like, if you were to purchase the Princeton Review's book called The Best 528 Colleges, wherever the number changes year by year. But if you bought that book, it has all these lists in it that are, the colleges where everybody's in the library all the time, colleges that are the biggest party schools, colleges where everybody's at the gym all the time, or colleges where everybody's out hiking in the forest all the time, right? They have those lists. And then also, you don't have to buy the book. If you just research on Princeton Review's site, you can find a lot of that stuff there as well. But that's another way to think about it, because, like, it probably wouldn't occur to you to think, and it didn't occur to me to think about any of this when I was applying to college, but like colleges where the students are the most active and love being out in the forest, like colleges in Colorado or Washington or Oregon, where, people are going out on hikes and whitewater rafting and canoeing and kayaking and stuff like that. There are students who would absolutely love that, and there are students that would absolutely hate that, right? And you should think about that. And if that's what you're into, I always laugh about that, that I chose TCU because of the community. But then, when I thought about it later in life, I was like, why didn't I choose a place that was near an ocean so I could at least go to a beach sometime while I was in college? Like, it didn't even occur to me to think about that.
It doesn't, but be careful, because some parents out there are like, Jay,
right. Yeah.
Shut up. No, it's funny that you bring that up, because one of the things that amazed me when I did all of my college tours with my kids was how much the colleges are really rallying around this idea of community. So you go to the rec center and you can rent kayaks, and you can do an equestrian, you can go horseback riding and learn that. You can do,
that's so cool.
Weekend trips with people, and they coordinate all that stuff. And Bobby, oh my gosh, to be able to take advantage of that, but but you have to take advantage of it as well, right? You have to put forth the effort.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think so many people would just not think to ask questions like this. They're just like, okay, what is the class ratio? And,
well, and it sounds like a fluffy topic, right? It sounds like a fluffy topic, but it really is such an important thing, because when my oldest one came home from college, we were driving back, and I was like, wow, think about it. That was just 20% of his life or more that he spent on that college campus. That's a big number. So, it is 4, 5, 6, hopefully not, right, to get your 4-year degree of your life, but it can be. So, enjoying where you are is huge, and just having that full experience of what college is supposed to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's, and I think what we've said too, I just saw some comments earlier today about people saying, gosh, all these college trips, and we can't afford to go visit a million colleges and all this stuff. But it's just, even if it's just a college that's nearby or whatever, just go just to start understanding these things, because you won't understand what matters to you about this until you go to any college and you're like, oh, well, okay, that doesn't seem like a good community here. Okay, now let me seek out and be looking for the kind of community I want. And I think this all does tie back to, as I mentioned, like, it does totally depend on the student. It's not like there are colleges with good community and bad community, right? It's
different.
It's just what kind of community do you want to be in, and what would you respond well to? And, I think part of that is, the question that I think a lot of people do know to ask, which is like, what is the role of social groups and fraternities and Greek life? Like, how big a deal is that? What percent of the students are in it? Because that makes a huge difference in your college experience. And so a college where 5% of the people are in Greek organizations compared to 30%, compared to 60%, those are entirely different community experiences. And you can really feel alienated one way or the other if if you weren't aware of that. So those are all important things to ask. And so I think
I do. And Bobby, to go back to your comment about maybe not having the means or the time to go to a college, I tell you this all the time. I'm super frugal. But I look at this as you are getting ready to invest not only 4, 5, possibly 6 years of your life, but also you're getting ready to invest a whole lot of money in this. And I will tell you, I've seen just heartbreaking stories of kids going off to college that first year, hating every minute of it.
Oh, yeah.
Calling home, the anxiety that goes with that. And the parents, just they're heartbreaking, going, oh my gosh, what have we done? So I look at this and I go, even though I get the financial piece of it, I absolutely do. If you can make it happen, I would say go for it.
Absolutely. And and it doesn't have to be some big extravagant trip, but it is absolutely worth it. And the cost, both financially and emotionally, of being miserable at a college and having to transfer or dropping out and coming back or something like that, the cost of that is far, far more than the cost of investing in going to visit a couple of colleges, for sure.
It is. And I know it's a chunk of time too. And for parents that both of you are working, that's an effort. I will tell you, for my family, just because we love doing this, whenever we're on a vacation, if there's a school within 30 miles, man, we are just veering off and going and just checking out the campus and eating.
Absolutely.
I love college campuses though, so it's fun for us.
Right.
But if you have a student that's a freshman, even 8th grade, start doing that, because, we are sometimes going out on vacations in places that we're not typically going to see. So
absolutely,
to start getting that experience and figuring that out early is always helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, what you do with students, where you help students figure out like what sort of majors they'd be interested in and stuff like that. I think just that thinking about those sort of things helps you understand more about yourself as a person and what drives you, what makes you passionate. And then that helps you figure out what kind of community you want. I think these things are all tied together that we talk about. And so, we're always both happy to answer questions. We both have access to lots of resources that can help you with this process. So if you're just now starting down the road of thinking about it, feel free to contact us anytime. There's a contact form on both our websites, and we're just happy to help.
All right. Thanks, Bobby.
All right. Thanks a lot. See you next time.